Hello and welcome to 81 All Out. This is your host, Siddhartha Vaidyanathan, and I would like to thank you for taking the time out to listen to this podcast. We are a crowd-funded endeavor, and you can support us at coffee.com. That's ko-fi.com/81 All Out to keep the show going.
In the air, Srishan takes it. India win.
He'll come back for the second. India have won the test match. India have won the series.
They're going to get back for two. India home. Lords goes wild.
Hello and welcome to a very special episode of the 81 All Out podcast. And today I'm joined by a senior editor from ESPNcricinfo, Osman Samiuddin. And, I'm saying senior editor ESPNcricinfo, but he's been a good friend of mine for many, many years. And I also consider him to be, on some days, the Wasim Akram of cricket writing, and on some days, the Waqar Yunus of cricket writing. So, so welcome, Osman.
Thank you for having me, Sidvi. It's great to catch up with you again, man. It's been too long. We need to do a tour together again, huh?
Absolutely. It's been too long. And yeah, the first tour we did together was 2006 in Pakistan. And what a tour that was, man.
The great
that was
tour. On and off the field, the great tour.
Amazing. I mean, I missed the 2003-04 historic tour, but I think we made it historic in 2006. So.
Yeah, this one was a funner tour, right? Because people were also interested in the cricket this time around, because this was the third series that they played, right? And by that time, if you remember, one of our constant moans and grumbles was "Ke sala bahut ho gayi yaar, this dosti. Just stop playing these series. Don't just stop. You're playing too much." And now look at us. Already 12 years since the last proper series between these two countries, and we're like, "Yaar, what days those were."
We'll get to that tour maybe at some point, but let's start off first. By talking, first of all, let me, I don't think I need to introduce Osman and what he does and what he has done to anybody who listens to this podcast. But Osman has been writing for ESPNcricinfo for a while. He also wrote for The National in Dubai. He also wrote this wonderful book called The Unquiet Ones, which is a history of Pakistan cricket. And we're going to be talking about that book today. And he has written a large number of pieces that are linked to on various subjects. Including profiles, some really, really evocative profiles of some of Pakistan's cricketers. And he's also covered the World Cup in 2019, which was wonderful coverage from him. So, Osman, tell us a bit about your formative experiences in cricket. What were your early memories of cricket? The players you watched, the games you watched, and was there anyone at home who was particularly influential, and those kind of things?
So absolutely no one in my family. Like my father was, my late father, he was a professor of statistics, had no interest in the game whatsoever. He once went to one day of test cricket in Dhaka when Dhaka was, part of Pakistan. And he was watching Pakistan play against the West Indies, I think it was. So this would have been probably the 59-60 series. And he had the grave misfortune of watching Hanif do his thing. So Hanif Mohammed batted the whole day for some 20 runs or something. And my father, Abu, was just like, I'm never going to watch this game again. He went really excited with his elder brother. And he spent, the day in the heat. And he was like, why did we come and waste our days like this? I would rather just go back and do some stats or something. So there was no cricket from that end at all. And I was actually, because we were living in Saudi Arabia, so I was into football. Football, and still is, my main kind of sport that I love, the most. But we had a family friend who used to live across the hall from us, an old uncle who passed away very recently, sadly, Javed uncle, who used to have a bunch of cricketer magazines, the Pakistan Cricketer, not the English one, but the Pakistan version. He used to get a subscription to them, he used to have them every month. And because, in Saudi at that time, there wasn't that much to do. There was one channel on TV, it was in Arabic, and you had to find things to do. So he passed me some of these magazines. I started reading. I thought, wow, what is this game? And so the first series that I remember actually actively following was, again, and, like my father, except I don't know how I didn't fall out of love with the game, was the 86-87 India-Pakistan series. When Pakistan went to India, of course, 5 tests, 4 of the most boring draws in the world, and then suddenly one crackerjack at the end in Bangalore, right? So, and that was the first cricket. The first cricket I watched then was, we used to get them on videotapes, VHS video cassette tapes. and I watched a day of the Ahmedabad test, in which Rizwan-ur-Zaman made again like 5 not out on the first day lunch session, morning session, 5 not out. Pakistan
Your dad
27
got
for
Hanif
1.
Mohammad, you got Rizwan-ur-Zaman.
I got Rizwan-ur-Zaman, who was probably a better short leg fielder than Hanif was. um, and I don't even know what it was about the game, but I think there was some facet of like Pakistan were pretty good at it, and they had guys like Imran, of course, who was big, and Wasim Akram was young and upcoming, and Abdul Qadir was this funny guy there, and so they had characters, I think, and there was the characters that I really kind of got drawn towards. And I didn't understand the game of that. I had no idea a test match, 2 innings, 5 days. Who the hell cares? But I think it built from there. And then, my uncle used to keep giving me these magazines, and I used to keep getting tapes. And then, of course, one of the biggest influences was whenever I used to come to Pakistan in the summer holidays, the Channel 9 highlights of the Benson and Hedges tri-series, which I think everyone of our kind of age has grown up falling in love with, right? So, those watching that cricket, like Simon O'Donnell with the slower ball, Steve Waugh when he was a bowler as well, in these colorful uniforms and stuff, that I think, so this would be about like 86, 87, 88, those years when I used to come to Pakistan for summer holidays, and my cousin had taped these matches and we used to watch them. That was like my real formative experience. And of course the 87 test, actually, the Pakistan beat England in Headingley, and Imran took 10 wickets in that test, and that was their first series win in England in 87, which was the year after India's, I think, right?
Yeah, 86, India won 86, yeah.
India won in 86, yeah. So Pakistan won in 87, first ever series win in England, sorry. And I watched the highlights of that again on holiday in Pakistan, summer holidays in Pakistan. I watched the highlights. And that kind of, that was the building up. And then there was a World Cup later that year, dramatic World Cup in the subcontinent. So I think it kind of, my kind of love affair with the game started from there. And that's the year that I then started playing as well. And, once you start playing the game, then you kind of begin to understand why it can be such a fun game. And of course, I used to bowl. Batting was like, yeah, whatever. It's for kings. I'm a peasant. I'm going to bowl. So yeah, that's kind of where it began, I think.
And playing was in Saudi or in Pakistan, in Karachi?
In Saudi and Pakistan, both. And the platform was the same: streets, tape ball, and whichever kid you can find who wanted to play. So in Saudi, we had to organize it a bit more because we were expats there, so you would find like Pakistani Indian kids, many Indian kids in my school over there. We used to play with them either in school at lunchtime, or then there would be tournaments. There would be Ramzan tournaments where we'd meet up and we'd play. And in Pakistan, of course, when we came in the summers, then every day you used to wait till about maybe 3 p.m. when it was still hot but kind of getting a little less hot, and then you'd just go out and you'd play till like 7, till Maghrib, basically, Maghrib pairs, and then you'd be playing till then. Tape ball always. So I hadn't played with a hard ball actually until I went to study in England. I came to study. I hadn't played with a hard ball ever, and I just had no idea. Playing with a hard ball just destroyed my career. Everything that I could do with a tape ball, I was like, oh man, what is this? This is like a different game altogether. I cannot do this. Why do they play with a hard ball? Why don't you just play tape ball cricket at a professional level? So
now that would be real cricket. Because
you,
I think you remember the first time I played table ball cricket with you in Karachi in 2006.
Yes. Yeah.
And I wrote a little diary entry about it. And yeah, honestly, I can't see why anyone would take up batting when you play table ball cricket over there, because
right?
bowling
because you can
is
do so
the
much
thing.
with the ball. And by the way, like I'm sure listeners will know this, but Sidvi has a mean wrong-footed action. He's like the right arm Sohail Tanveer. Actually no, he's like Mike Proctor. Let's forget Sohail Tanveer. I do you a disservice.
No. Sohail Tanveer. I'll go with Sohail Tanveer. Come on. Okay.
No, man. Come on. Banana swing as well with you. I remember the banana swing, but like a proper wrong foot action. And it's not, of course, technically it's not wrong foot, right? It's just you release a little earlier or whatever. But
yeah. It's not wrong foot. It's just right foot.
Exactly. It's not wrong foot. It's right foot action. But
so you spoke about the Cricketer magazine. I want to get that in, because it seems to have been like an institution for in Pakistan, and many people have read it, fallen in love with it. You wrote a piece in 2008, I think, when the magazine actually shut down.
Yeah, the English version.
I think Hanif Mohammad was the first, appointed the first, so to speak, editor, but it was Gul Hamid Bhatti who was
So it
doing.
wasn't the brainchild and like the driving kind of business and even editorial force was a gentleman called Riaz Mansouri.
Okay, okay,
Lovely
yeah.
guy, like fun guy, owned the magazine, and he eventually began to own many other magazines. Started off with nothing, loved cricket. And he started off, his great story, he started off by like basically building up a scrapbook of newspaper clippings and getting autographs in it and stuff, like so many of us do. And that to him, the natural progression of that was to do it on a monthly basis. And so he started bringing out a magazine, and then somehow, because he's a real networker as well, right? Raz Mansouri, great guy, like works his way into things, amazing, gets everything done that he wants to. Somehow he like mangled this meeting with Hanif Mohammed and just kept like pushing him and pushing him. And Hanif Mohammed was like, who is this guy? Why does he like just go away? Like, nahi, sir, aap chief editor ban jaye, hamare magazine ke bahut achhi cheez hogi. Kept at him, and eventually, like, I think got onto Asif Iqbal and got Asif Iqbal to then convince Hanif to become. And Hanif did nothing, right? Hanif was just, there's my name on the masthead, that's it. But the name on the masthead was what sold the magazine to advertisers, like, because Riaz Mansouri went to advertisers and said, "Dekhiye, Hanif Mohammed's magazine," and they were like, "Of course, we will give you ads. What do you want? We will give you." So
Yeah,
he
he was
built it from
huge
there.
then, right? Yeah, Hanif.
Massive, man. Hanif was still, and this started in 71. So Hanif had just retired, but he was still like, the preeminent figure in the game alongside like Kardar, who was, then the board chairman. It started from there, and then it just grew. And, for guys like me who are outside of Pakistan, and this is, in a time, of course, before the internet, before Stats Guru, like this was our only way of kind of, documenting the game in a way. So you'd have interviews with your favorite stars in it. You'd have interviews with upcoming players in it. This is the way you kind of, because you didn't see any cricket, so this was the way you kind of kept tabs on, acha, this guy looks good. This guy sounds good. And, they used to have Gul Hamid Bhatti was, of course, like a major force in the magazine, of course, the late Gul Hamid Bhatti. He used to have like, the last 5 pages of the magazine were always just test career records of every player from every country. Like every current player, it was just test career records. So it was like Stats Guru,
Oh,
but
the
just
old
on 5
Stats
pages.
Guru.
Yeah,
Yeah.
basically. So, and it was just a great way of building up your knowledge and love, and just the way you the way you documented the game. It was just amazing, And so it kept, I kept a subscription to it until pretty much 2006, I think. And, and the funny thing is that the English version came out first. So the Urdu version of the magazine didn't come out until 79. So 8 years after the English had started, which says a lot about, the way the game was in Pakistan during that time, because it was just kind of changing from a game of the elite to just being completely democratized, and a lot of like, people from smaller towns and villages coming into the game. So it was kind of changing, but I always found it really fascinating that he began, and he started the magazine in English, because he said that, because English, I'm trying to remember exactly what he had said to me, but I asked him, and he said, basically his answer was that, English was posh and the game was posh. And I wanted to reach that clientele and that readership. And so that's why I began it in English, basically, because that's where the influence and the power in the country was, or whatever. Like the commentary on radio was always in English, and there was great resistance when Umar Qureshi and Jamshed Markar were commentating, the great, like, first duo of commentary in Pakistan. There was great resistance within Radio Pakistan when somebody suggested, blasphemous idea, okay, hey, how about we do like half an hour in Urdu every session? So we're like, no, what are you talking about? Cricket is not a game for the Urdu language. How will you describe mid-wicket and googly in Urdu? So they came up with crazy phrases like dhokebaz wali gend, which is a deceptive ball for the googly, dhokebaz wali gend and stuff like this. So it was a real struggle until this gentleman, also Munir Hussain, came onto the scene, who really pushed for commentary in Urdu and brought out his own Urdu magazine, which really was like a rival to the Cricketer. And around that time, the game was just spreading, and lots of people from lots of different places were coming into the game. So it's a fascinating journey.
Yeah. So what Hanif Mohammed managed to repel Charlie Griffith, but he couldn't repel Mansouri.
Riaz Mansouri. He could
Riaz
not.
Mansouri.
Charlie Griffith's bouncers, he played, he batted for 16 hours, God knows what. Riaz Mansouri, 3 days of persistence. Bye, boss. I'll be your editor.
Okay, we move on to the 90s. And of course, that must have been the time when you're really coming, in your teenage years and getting to know cricket. And what better time to follow Pakistan cricket, both for the highs and the lows, because there were the
Absolutely.
great highs and the great lows through the
You know,
90s.
for the longest time, I thought this was the way it was supposed to be. That if you follow a sports team, like, I'm sure there are like lifelong fans of, I don't know, like Manchester United or the Lakers, maybe, and you're kind of used to, I know they go through bad periods, but you're used to like success. With Pakistan, I was just like, this is one day you will be 102 all out chasing 150, and the next day you'll chase down 275, with Salim Malik scoring like 78 off 38 balls or whatever it was. I just thought that this variation is just the way cricket is, and it's that kind of game. But the 90s was like truly an amazing time. And generally, I think for all cricket, actually, the 90s, there's a real fondness for that period. You must have watched a lot of cricket in the 90s. There was great fast bowling. There was some good batsmen. There was guys like, obviously Sachin and Lara and stuff. And Pakistan had Malik and Ijaz Ahmed, crazy characters. It was just, I think, and coinciding, growing up, coinciding with Pakistan becoming like a real proper powerhouse. Of course, they're a great team in the 80s as well. And that growth had been happening. But I think in the 90s, when they became this like magnificent kind of, we will be world beaters one day and we will absolutely get 43 all out to West Indies the next day. Phil Simmons will take 4 for 3 off 10 overs in 10 overs against us. It will happen. It was just like, it was to be alive. It was like, yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, 96, they lose the quarterfinal to India and Bangalore. Then their houses are stoned. They can't even go home, many of them. And then they go to that tournament in Singapore. Jayasuriya blast them all over the place. And then Pakistan come and win that tournament in the final.
They win the tournament.
Amir Sohail captains them.
Amir Sohail captain. Can you imagine? Amir Sohail captaining, and then, Afridi, later that year, Afridi comes out. And you're just like, who the hell is this kid? I thought we had gotten like all our quota of superstars we've gotten. Suddenly this 16-year-old, okay, even if he's 20, but like, look at what he's doing. It doesn't matter so much like how old he is. Look at what he's doing. That's one thing I could never figure out, actually, because I guess we're used to it in Pakistan, and maybe to a degree at some point in India also, that, ages were always fake or they weren't accurate.
Oh,
I
yeah,
wouldn't
yeah,
say fake as much as accuracy. So I couldn't understand the obsession that like the Western world had with Afridi's age. But I was like, Salah, are you guys not looking at what he's doing? Like, look, forget his age. Look at what he just hit 100 of 37 balls, Like, what more do you want? And then, like, the great story I have about that Afridi innings, nobody watched it, of course, because they didn't show it in Pakistan. And, it came on tape, like, many days later.
Yeah, but they didn't show it in India as well. Yeah.
Yeah, they showed it. Somehow they missed that. And then I happened to see on that same tour that we were talking about earlier, the 2005-6 tour of India, 2004-5 tour that Pakistan did of India, Afridi scored 100 in Kanpur of 45 balls, right?
Yeah.
And so I watched it and I was like, oh my God, like, what have I just seen? What's happened here? And the first message, and you'll appreciate this, the first message I got, SMS in those days, no WhatsApp or anything, old bad phone. And first SMS is from Rahul Bhattacharya. And he says, now I know how he did it. Because he'd also never seen the 96 innings. The 96, nobody had ever seen it. And he's like, Salah, now I believe. And now I know how he did it because I've seen this. It was just an amazing, and so he was part of that 90s growing up experience as well, And when he saw these guys doing that, you were like, oh man, like this, they made that sport, which has no right to be sexy, but they made that sport completely sexy in Pakistan.
No, and everywhere. I mean, I honestly, watching Pakistan, I'm sure, for me, and I'm sure many people in India as well, there was an irresistible appeal. I mean, you never knew what could come. I mean, my favorite memories of that match where you had Basit Ali making that 100. And here's this guy, and he's taking on the West Indies, and he hits Curtly Ambrose for the most extraordinary six, man. Like, he's like, who hits Curtly Ambrose for six?
Basit Ali, right? Eclipsed, I think, that same day by Lara's, right?
Eclipsed the same day by Lara.
Basit Ali was one of those, right? At that time. So he debuted in 92. We saw that tour. It was in the West Indies. So we saw it on TV. I was in Pakistan during the holidays, and that tour was happening around summertime. And he debuted in the first ODI or second ODI, great ODI series, 2-2 with the last match tied. And Basit Ali debuts. He's taken the place of Miandad. and he's being touted as the new Miandad. And he makes like I think 16 or 18 on his first innings, like his ODI debut innings. And I swear he just played exactly like Miandad. Like, the same shuffling to nudge to leg, shuffling aside a little bit. And like you could just see, you saw him and he did, he was up against Ambrose, Walsh, and I think Winston Benjamin was still playing at that time. But, 3 or 4 bowlers against West Indies, who were still pretty good then. 92, they were still like a good
Especially at
attack and
home.
stuff. Especially at home. And this guy was just playing with such like I've been here all my life. And so we were like, man, how has he come? And he's exactly like Miandad. And then he went on to have a good test series. He made 92 in one of the test matches. And for a couple of years, leading up to that, in fact, that 100 in Sharjah, Basit Ali was like the next big thing in Pakistani batting. Inzamam was kind of there, but Inzamam was a bit flaky. And Basit was seen as the guy who could like Miandad, he knew how to score runs. And then of course he got involved in all this fixing and then got caught up and then left the game. But he in fact, Basit Ali, I still rank him as one of the greatest losses for me personally, because I was invested into his batting like in a big way, because he was just like, it was like watching Miandad suddenly debut. We'd never seen Miandad debut. I saw him from the mid 80s by when he was already an established great. But watching Basit was like, this is what Miandad must have been like when he first debuted. He's so smart, just knew how to bat. And his record in those early years when he was like still into the game was pretty phenomenal.
Yeah. So there was so many cricketers who did things that you still remember. Of course, your favorite, one of your favorites, Asif Mujtaba, hitting that 6 in Australia to tie that match.
Imagine. That was like the low bar that we set ourselves. Huh? Asif Mujtaba will hit a last ball 6. One bar is Miandad hitting last ball 6 against India. Low bar is Asif Mujtaba. So even Asif Mujtaba can hit a last ball 6 to tie.
Miandad hit a 6 when they needed 4. Asif Mujtaba hit a 6 when you needed 7.
When you needed 7, yeah. Tie the game. No ball. And waist high full toss also, by the way. Steve Waugh. Waist high full toss. That should have been 1 no ball and he would have won it also. Aussie umpiring.
So that the end of the 90s, early 2000s, of course, was a tumultuous period in world cricket, but especially in Pakistan cricket. So much happening with fixing the 99 World Cup final, the 99 World Cup, through that World Cup. And in fact, we did an episode only on the 99 Pakistan team with Hassan Chima and Ahmed Naqvi. I'll link to that as well.
The mighty 90 side.
Yeah, the mighty side. But that was also around the time when you must have been, finding your way, into your career and things, and thinking about cricket writing, because early 2000s was when you probably started writing on cricket. So talk us about that, about your personal journey into cricket writing.
So, it was preceded by a phase of my life in which I completely lost touch with cricket. I came to England from Saudi. I came to England to study. And then, when you're at university and you're like away from home for the first time ever, as a teenager, you're just like, okay, what's cricket? Yeah, forget that. There's so many more fun things to do in life. Why should I sit down and watch even 7 hours a day? Yeah? Who's going to spend that? So a lot of like from 97 to, I would say, about 2000 probably. So 3 or 4 years from the mid 90s are like a blur to me. I remember certain things, but I certainly wasn't watching as much or following as much as I had been, the preceding whatever 10 years. But then I eventually moved back to Pakistan in 2002, and then I was like, what else can you do here? So I remember I wrote to I got a job. I was working in Dawn for a while, Dawn newspaper, and I was working for one of their magazines. And cricket was there. I had tried my hand at cricket writing a little bit just for myself. And in those days, I was writing stuff. I didn't have a computer. I remember I'd written a piece.
So longhand.
So I'd written a piece on the 2000 Antigua Test. The famous Antigua Test, which West Indies won by 1 wicket. In which I had, I remember I had bitched out Ramiz Raja's commentary even back then. Like back in 2000, I had said something about commentators curse and Ramiz Raja, like, why are you doing this to the Pakistan team? Never published anywhere. Of course, I kept it. In fact, I sent it to Gul Hamid Bhatti, who very politely turned it down and said, no, it's very lovely, but very long and, a bit too personal and all. I was like, okay, no problem, Bhatti Saab. Thank you for the whatever. So And then I started working.
You should publish it now. If you have it, you should put it now somewhere.
I must have it somewhere, but I'd be too embarrassed to publish it. Yeah, not least, and I would also be scared of offending Ramiz, Rambo. Sorry, Rambo.
Please,
My
enough
bad.
people have offended Ramiz. Huh? You don't need to be scared of offending Ramiz.
That's also true. That's also Ramiz porn hashtag. Please continue. So I was working, and then I was okay, Don. I wasn't unhappy working, but I thought cricket let's try something. So I just come back from England, and I brought back I think it was the Wisden Cricketer or the Wisden Cricket Monthly, whatever, one of those magazines with me. And in the back there was an advert saying, if you are a recent graduate and you want to intern with us, please write in to Tim Delisle, who was the editor then. So I had the email and I just wrote to him. I thinking, I've moved back to Pakistan, so there's no way I can apply to be an intern, but I'll write to him anyway, just on the off chance. And so he wrote back to me and he said, look, I'm really sorry. If you were here, I would have loved to have spoken to you about this and maybe even taken it further and stuff. But now that you're in Pakistan, why don't I put you in touch with Sambit Bal, who is our guy in Asia, in India? And I was like, oh, okay, why not? So I wrote to Sambit. And Sambit wrote back in typical Sambit style, typos everywhere in the email and just very matter of fact. And so I was this young guy, had never written for any magazine before on cricket. And he writes back saying, yeah, if you can, these two ideas, why don't you try writing on this and let me know how it goes. Okay. And I think the first piece for the magazine, so this was for
Wisden Asia Cricket.
Wisden Asia, yeah, Wisden Asia. And the piece was on 11 fleeting talents or whatever, So I got a chance to write about Basit Ali.
Quintessential Pakistani topic.
Total. But it was actually so everyone. So, I put in random names like David Capel, who I had once seen play his debut
world
test
over
against. Yeah.
Neil Malander. I'm sure you put in Neil Malander.
No, Malander hadn't. Oh yeah, no, I should have done, but I didn't. I think I may have done. I actually may have done. Malander, Basit Ali was there. Malander might have been there. Qasim Umar was there. Qasim Umar was the opener, of course.
Okay.
So he said, okay, we'll publish it. I was like, Arey, published it. Then didn't hear anything for a couple of months, and I kept pitching him ideas. And suddenly, just after the 2003 World Cup, Pakistan sacked captain, Waqar Yunus gone,
everyone
gone, every selector gone, and Rashid Latif became the new captain. And so Sambit writes to me one day saying, hey, can you get an interview with Rashid Latif? I need it tomorrow. The magazine is closing the day after. Typical Sambit. Yeah? Magazine is closing the day after. I need it tomorrow. Asking some guy that he's, maybe dealt with once in his life. I was like, yes, I will do it. I got the number for Rashid Latif from a sports reporter in Dawn. So he was sitting downstairs. We were on another floor. Called him up. I said, please, Khalid bhai, Rashid Latif ka number hai. Kyun nahi, number diya. Called him from the landline. Not expecting, I don't know what to expect. Rashid answered the phone. I said, haan ji, kaun bol raha hai? In his muttering mumble, deep mumble that he has. And so the lucky thing was that you could throw the name Wisden around at that time. People would be like, acha, Wisden, come. So I said Wisden Asia Cricket. Asia Cricket, I said quietly. I said Wisden loudly. Wisden Asia Cricket. And Rashid was like, aa jao. This is where I live. Come to the house. And I was like, are you serious? He's like, come in a couple of hours. I was like, okay, I need that much time for the questions. And he said, come, but do one thing. I said, what? Tell me. He says, bring a packet of Benson and Hedges with you. I was like, okay, I'll do it. No problems. I said, as long as you can give me one of them. I have quit smoking now. Sorry. Bad for you. Don't do it. But I said, as long as you can give me one, I will take. So then 2 hours later, I turned up at his house. And the guy gave me an interview and a great interview also saying that I will bring back Shoaib Akhtar. I will bring back Inzamam. These guys had been discarded after the World Cup. He said, I will bring them back. Wrote it all up, sent it to Sambit. Sambit was like, great, thanks. And I was expecting come on, boss, a little bit more. Great, thanks. Okay, whatever. And so it started from there. I started writing for the magazine. I think the first big piece that I did was it was a cover story for when India were touring Pakistan. It was on Pakistani fast bowling. And it was I spoke to a lot of people about it and included one great moment in my life when I'd been trying to get in touch with Wasim Akram, who at that time was still oh my God, he's Wasim Akram. And I couldn't get through, but I left a message at his house with one of his cooks or something. And then one day I was asleep in the afternoon. My mother comes up and says, Usman, beta, Wasim Akram hai phone pe. And I was like, what? He called back. He called back and I was like, are you sure? Are you sure? She's like, keh rahe hain ki Wasim Akram hai, so he must be Wasim Akram. I was like, oh my God. Half an hour interview with him. And, it just built from there. And then, so I covered the when India visited Pakistan, that series. I covered that taking a holiday from Dawn, covered it for Cricinfo. And then the next year, when Pakistan went to India, which is when I, hung out with you for the first time ever properly and stuff. Sambit, in his usual style, came up to me in the press box in Bangalore. In fact, came up to me in the press box. We were eating some food, and he says, "Yeah, what about like if you do a full-time job for us?" Yes, a drop plate, drop everything, write to Don there and then say, "Okay, bye guys, I quit." And then it began. So in August 2005, so the tour happened, it ended in April 2005, and by August 2005, I had begun like full-time with Cricinfo.
So the Yunus Khan double hundred was not the story of that Bangalore test.
Not at all.
It was
It was
you getting the full-time job.
It was me getting the full-time job. It was me meeting my wife, my future wife, to be met her at the match. Also, she was covering it. So like Yunus Khan's double hundred was like, yeah, whatever, yeah. It was an ordinary innings.
So you got this job, and then you, of course, continued full time with them and all that. But at what point of time did you get an idea for this book, this wonderful book that you wrote? Because I remember this, you had thought of this book idea for a while.
In fact, I hadn't even thought of it. I had always thought that I would like to do a book, and of course, like many writers, and I had no idea what I wanted to write about. Some ideas had come, many ideas had gone because they weren't sustainable. And then one day in 2007, I remember May 2007, so just after that disaster World Cup, uh, uh, I got an email from Karthika at HarperCollins, and she had gotten my name from Sharda. So eternally thankful, always, and grateful to Sharda. But she had gotten my name, and she just wrote saying, "Hey, do you fancy writing a history of Pakistan cricket?" And I was like, okay. And next day she had sent a contract and everything, on which, by the way, the original deadline was for me to produce a manuscript by 2008 April.
Oh wow!
By 2008 April, I had maybe not even thought about the book. Let alone like writing a manuscript. I had not even thought about it at all. So it was just like, but so the idea came from her. Like I hadn't really thought about it. But it took like a long time to just get it right in my head. Like the research part was actually, in the early days, the research part was very easy. Because I had an idea, of who I should meet and who would be good people to talk about it. Because Pakistan's history was fairly young, a lot of the people were still alive. So that way it was quite easy to do the research. So I planned trips to Lahore to coincide with match coverage for Cricinfo. I took an extra day or two, and I would spend like 4 or 5 days scouring like old Lahore, old city Lahore, meeting a lot of the old club players and stuff like that, and talking to them about the game. So that part was okay. It was manageable. The documented part was also not bad, because there were newspapers, Urdu and English, that had covered the game, of course. Not in like a massive amount of depth, but they'd covered it. And, they would have like little stories which came in handy. The really difficult part I found was like how to write it and how to structure it. That was like, and so this process began probably, I started writing properly. And like you'll remember, 2009, 2007 to 2009 to 2010 was a really crazy period for Pakistan cricket. Like, all kinds, starting from the Oval Test forfeit, going up through doping bans, through terrorism, through more
Through
doping.
Woolmer started
Woolmer's
with Woolmer.
death. Sorry, Woolmer's death. Then fixing. So that period was just intense, and like so, I was busy every day with work for the site. The reportage, feature writing, comments, or whatever. But I would find time to do something on the book. I would keep writing. I would transcribe interviews that I had done. I started writing. But the real crunch moment came like when I started writing. I had no idea how to like structure the book and what kind of shape it would take. So would I be writing first person? Would I make it a personal kind of journey through Pakistan cricket, or would I like do a documented history of the game? I had no idea. So I remember like my first half a manuscript that I wrote. So I did this probably around 2011. I had done like half a manuscript or whatever. And it was a mix of like essays and personal writing, and then history writing as well, like kind of academic, whatever, documentation. and I sent it to Rahul and his wife Shruti to have a look at. And so they actually broke it for me. They cracked it. They wrote back, both of them, and similar things they said. I'm always grateful to them. Also, Shruti especially, she wrote back and said that basically you have to work out how you want to write this book, what way you want to go. And in fact, funnily enough, I think both of them suggested, like, the two options that were available, they each suggested one each. So I think Shruti said that you should do it as like a history. So, don't put yourself into it. Do it as a history. And Rahul said the other one. He said, no, why don't you make it like a essays, personal essays or whatever. But for whatever reason, I think I found it easier to go with Shruti's suggestion. And so, once that had sat in my head, like I figured out, okay, I'm going to write like this. Then I thought, okay, let's not be too fancy. Let's break it into like chronological order, because, that's the kind of thing that makes most sense. And so that way it's like a fairly, it's a fairly normal structure. It starts from the beginning, ends at the end or whatever. And the only, like, the real, I guess the flourish I allowed myself was to have those profiles of, like, one or two greats from each of the eras in the game. But it was just like, it was a wonderful experience, like just meeting so many people. I've forgotten so much of it, but I've got, like, all the transcripts and all. I've got even the tapes I've got recorded somewhere. But it was amazing because, I ended up actually, because I'd never lived in Pakistan. When I grew up, I wasn't born in Pakistan. I never lived in Pakistan. I would come, of course, and I had a lot of interaction with it, and I saw, it was my country or whatever. I'd never lived in it, so I ended up learning a lot about the country through the book, through my research for the book. And I hope some of that kind of comes out in the book. But at least for me personally, it was like just amazing to be able to learn so much. And to be able to produce something at the end of it, it's a great privilege, yeah, to be able to, like, at the end of it, you produce something, but you're also like learning this kind of amount. I didn't know anything about Pakistan, really. Like, and the stuff I learned about, like, PIA and its earliest leaders, early constitutional history in Pakistan, the way it's treated its minorities, the problems with East Pakistan, now Bangladesh, Balochistan. There's a lot of stuff that I just didn't have a clue. And then, because I had to reach out to people and talk to them about it, and then go in and look at Dawn. In fact, the greatest archive resource that I used was, is it the Nehru Library in Delhi?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was there for a month on a trip. Anisa, of course, Anisa came back to visit family, and I went with her. And I was there for about a month, and I spent every day in the library looking at Dawn and other, like, old Indian newspapers. And it was like invaluable resource, and I found myself, like, spending hours not reading anything about the cricket, but just reading, like, other news items and other features from that time, because you get like a real idea. It's a cliche or whatever, but newspapers really are like documenters of history on a daily basis. So that, like, I think I loved that more than anything, was that I became confident in that I knew more about the country than I had ever done before. Before the book, in 2005, when I used to meet people, and people used to think that because he's Cricinfo's Pakistan guy, he must know a lot about the country. I used to feel like a fraud because I didn't know jack about the country. I hadn't traveled in the country at all. I'd only been to Karachi and Islamabad. But once I did the book and I traveled for it and I researched and I met people, which I hadn't before, and I learned about the country, it was around that period that I truly started to feel, okay, now I know what this place is about and I'm in it.
Yeah, in 2006, actually, on that tour, we both went to Peshawar together for that one day. And I think that was probably your first trip to Peshawar, or one of your,
absolutely.
yeah. And I remember both of us talking and saying that, it's all obviously new for me, but it's also new for you, because you haven't been to that side of the country.
That tour, by the way, so we went to Peshawar, we went to Pindi, we went to
Multan.
Faisalabad, Multan. And so, I had only been to, like, for example, I'd only been to Multan and Faisalabad once before that trip. And that was on the preceding tour of when England came, because they played in Multan and Faisalabad. So those were literally like my first times that I had been to, like, different parts of the country. So, then when I started doing the book and I started traveling, I went to Peshawar again a few more times. Never got to go to Quetta in Balochistan, but, I did interior Sindh, did Punjab, a lot of Punjab and stuff. And so I really, like, truly felt that, okay, now at least I don't have to be ashamed that I'm a fraud in this country who doesn't know anything about this country. Like, I thought that, okay, I know a fair bit about this country. I am comfortably from this country. And during that experience, when people used to then come, a few tours happened, South Africa came, and, other tours happened. And you'd be able to talk to them and actually tell them with some kind of confidence that, oh, they've asked you a question. Oh, I know the answer to that. And I know why this is this way, and I know why that. And the other thing, like, it was just hanging out with Pakistani journalists who, I think we'll both agree are the greatest breed of humanity, like ever. So hanging out with them also was just like, we live abroad, and like I had lived abroad, and I had been Pakistani, but of course it was a cursory thing that, my passport is Pakistani, my parents are, I am Pakistani, but I hadn't really ever thought about like being Pakistani. And then once you lived in the country and you hung out with like, Pakistanis and stuff, and you learned a bit more about the country, then I actually felt, okay, like at least now in my life, I know who I am. I am a Pakistani. And since then, I've moved again to like Abu Dhabi and now here in London. But at least I had that grounding period of 10 years, the end result of which was this book, through which I can say, if somebody asks me, I can say I'm Pakistani, and like I don't feel like a fraud saying it. I don't feel like any other emotion other than this is the truth of who I am. So I really appreciate that about it, and I'll never forget that about the book, basically, and the whole process of getting that book out.
So yeah, before I get to the book, which is of course a wonderful topic to discuss, one thing about that phase between 2007 and 2010, because I was working in Cricinfo for a part of that time, and I was in touch with you as well. I mean, waking up every day must have been like, okay, what are we going to have here? Because every day, you had Woolmer, you had the Sri Lankan attacks, you had the spot fixing, and then you had so many other little things. And where does this end? And of course, you had so many things in the non-cricketing part of Pakistan as well, in the politics and in the terrorism and everything else that was happening.
And it was the result of each other. I think there's symbiosis there or whatever. It was because of the way the country was that this stuff was happening in cricket as well. And I think you internalize it after a while. And after a while of reporting, so the first shock comes from that first crisis. So I'm trying to remember. I think 2006. The first thing really was the ball tampering.
The
Inzamam walking off, and I wasn't in England for that tour, so I was covering it from Pakistan, and it happened, and it's like, oh, okay, something big has happened. So then you're covering the fallout of that, and you're covering getting into it and stuff, covering the fallout, and then in October, so that's like maybe barely 2 months later, you're still kind of in the fallout. I get a call in the morning from somebody in the PCB who says that if you want a story, you do it right now, but you cannot say who it is and what it is. But two of your fast bowlers are going to be kicked out of the Champions Trophy because they've tested positive for steroids, Asif and Shoaib.
Oh, yes.
I was like, it's 6 in the morning. It's literally 6:30 in the morning. But it gives you a real buzz. You're like, okay, I'm up. I've got a mobile phone. I've got a laptop. Let's do this, But like, and like it just kept happening, and it just kept feeling normal. It kept feeling like this is what it should be like. And I discuss this sometimes with, Firdaus Munda, who's a South Africa correspondent. She's been going through that process this last year in a way, because South Africa cricket has really, it's like imploded in a big way over the last year. And every day she's just been like, when will this end? When will this end? I don't want it to end. I don't want it to end. When will it end? I don't want it to end. Because, it gives you a real buzz because you're covering it. You're covering like a crisis. It's from a purely selfish journalism point of view, it's a real buzz to cover a crisis, to cover a big story or whatever. And so it became normal. It happened, and, the country was falling apart, and the cricket naturally had to fall apart because, you need to have a country for the cricket to take place. And there were a lot of things happening at that time. I was about to get married as well. And it was just, I look back on it now, and I think that there's no way I could go through something like that again, though. Like I don't think I would have the energy or the mental bandwidth to go, because like, I'll tell you an example, like one of the least, we didn't even mention a story right now, which was, and you'll remember it immediately, which was when Shoaib hit Asif with a bat.
Of
course,
before
the 2007 T20 World Cup. That was just like a
small story, a box.
And again, for that, I was out. I remember distinctly, I was out in a cafe with some friends. It was 11 at night. I had just got a new Nokia phone, which is one of the earliest like Nokia smartphones, like those brick laptop types. And they used to get email on them as well. So I got an email from somebody saying that, boss, some trouble has happened. I got an email from somebody in the team saying, boss, some trouble has happened. in the dressing room right now. I was like, yeah, I'm just out with friends. It's like 11. I don't want to what? But then you can't say no, right? No matter what time it is, especially if you're not married, you don't have children, you have no commitments. You're like, okay, I'll do it. And so, that was one of the smaller stories. Asif got arrested in Dubai. So, and he was put up in a jail inside Dubai airport for like 14 days. These were just like the small stories that chalo chalta hai. The terror attack happened. Luckily for the terror attack, I was actually, you'll remember this, I was in Delhi getting married on the day it happened.
Yeah.
So, I was like, okay, at least I didn't have to cover that story. But even then, people were calling me saying, we know you just got married, but do you want to? I was like, no, get away from me, leave me alone.
Yeah, that would have been international. I'm sure you got calls from international press for that.
Yeah, man. It's just like I got calls from TV channels, a lot of TV channels in India who knew I was there. And Isa worked in the TV channel. So, her friends were like, we're really sorry, Annie. We know you're getting married just now, but go to smile. And bye. He's not speaking to anyone. Turn your phone off.
On your first night, can you just give us some expert comments on this situation?
On this terror attack. I was like, what do you want to know? Terrorists came, they shot at cricketers, now they're gone. Okay? What do you want to know? Yunus Khan is talking. And those days, we had Alex Brown with us at Cricinfo. So he did a great job in coverage of that crisis. Like, he got through to the PCB. He got an exclusive interview with Yunus Khan like minutes after it happened. Amazing. Alex Brown, like, news getting and all. But I got a thrill out of it. But also, I look back at it, I think that at the point where I really felt like this is enough now was the 2007 spot fixing thing, 2010 spot fixing thing. And it wasn't, because of the romance of, hi, Amir, so young and all this, and Asif and all. It was just that, like, guys, just stop it now. I just want a normal tour where I don't have to write explaining something that has gone wrong in Pakistan cricket with a bigger picture in mind. And I was writing on the book as well, and everything was just like piling up. And I was like, look, I've had enough. I don't want to be doing any more of this.
So that's the thing with book writing, right? It's like the bandwidth. You need time to think, and just time to do nothing, so that the thoughts seep in.
This is it. You need, and people think that you're doing nothing, but actually I feel constantly, especially I run, and I know that you were running at least, but I know that for me, like, running really helps structure my thoughts when I'm working on a piece. The run is when I go and I start putting things in my head in the right place. And so people might think that you're not doing anything, but you're actually, like, a lot of the time you're figuring out, you've got a map in your head of your piece or your book, and you're figuring out the right way to go from the entrance to the exit. Basically, that's what it's all about, right? The process is how you get from here to here in this map of a piece or a book that you have. You've mapped it out, but you need to work out a way of getting it. And so, like you said, with a book, you need that bandwidth, and if every day Asif is hitting somebody with a bat, or somebody's tampering a ball, or Ijaz Butt, oh my God, like, if Ijaz Butt is going crazy, you don't have that time. And so it was only then I moved to Abu Dhabi with the national, and I'd had a baby girl. My daughter was born by then, and we moved. And what I did, I finally decided that the only way I really can do this, and over there was a daily writing job as well, so I had to write like 2 columns a week plus reportage and stuff. So the only way I could do it, and I found this the best way, and I did it recently again with the Amir piece as well, was that I started waking up at 5:30 or 6 before the house got up, and I just spent those first 2 hours of a day, 2.5 hours, just on that book. And that is when I broke, like, the bulk of the writing for it. And like, 2.5 hours in the morning when nothing else is happening. Everyone's asleep in the house and there's no news coming in or nothing like that. And you just do it then. And so I really found that, and again, I did it with the Amir piece that I wrote recently. You just need, you need bandwidth. So you need to get away from, the grind.
And it's amazing how when you're writing, and when you're not doing stuff, when you're washing dishes, or when you're just doing some routine stuff, it's amazing how some sentence that you've written comes back to your head, and then you think, no, actually, I shouldn't have written this. I should write something else. 100%. And that will never happen if you are doing something else consciously.
Never.
It only happens in that subconscious state.
It's when you least expect it, right? When, for example, when I run, I'm thinking, and I say exactly like you said, a sentence comes up and you think, okay, this is a better way to write the sentence. And now, of course, I stop and I open up notes and I write down. Like notes is like the
on
greatest
your
invention for me.
smartphone.
Yeah. So the
Okay.
notes app or whatever, I just write
Yeah.
down there and
Okay.
then I write down. I do the process there. And so a lot of times now when I'm thinking about a piece or I have ideas or whatever, I will immediately write it down just to keep in there. And then I will go back, revisit the same document or notes and tweak and tweak and build and build and build until like, you get a bit more than the skeleton. You get the skeleton and a bit of flesh of a piece, basically.
Apart from running, the other thing that I found that really, really helps me, jigsaw puzzles. Jigsaw puzzles are
Really?
an amazing way to do nothing because you're thinking of the jigsaw, but then there are a lot of other thoughts that keep coming to you through the puzzles.
But
So,
aren't you spending like a lot of time concentrating, finding the piece?
yeah, but that concentration is not like it allows you that other thing to seep in as well. So, that thing, try it. It's really
I
helped
will.
me. So anyway, so coming to this book, you it's one of the things you mentioned was that it was a young history, and so you actually found people who were on that 1954 Pakistan tour to England,
Yeah.
where basically the book starts. By
Yeah.
the way, I request all of you to please read the book if you haven't. We are not going to get into like minute details, and the writing is
Yeah.
wonderful.
Thank you.
But you start the book with the 1954 tour to England, Pakistan's tour to England.
Yeah.
And, you found these people who you could speak to who were actually giving you such lovely information about the mood, what the captain said, what this person said. But there is one thing in that, of course, the main highlight of that test in the Oval was that Fazal Mahmood spell
Yeah.
that he bowls. But the one thing that is found the most outrageous thing that I have read in the book that comes in the page 4 or something is that before the fourth test, where Pakistan basically were hammered quite a lot before that,
Yeah.
Fazal Mahmood and another player were actually thinking of putting out a statement saying Pakistan will win this fourth test.
Yes.
Now, that is taking audacity to a new level, man.
but that is what Fazal was. This is the thing. And you think like these things are like national characteristics and all. They're not. They're driven by like individuals who are just like crazy. Fazal Mahmood was like this random guy who just had the self-confidence of the entire world in his body. Yeah, and why wouldn't you? When you look like him, when you kind of had the swag that he had and stuff. He was a good-looking guy, well built and all, and he'd been picked for India, so he knew he was good enough to play. He had no doubts that he was good enough to play. He was picked for India before partition or whatever.
And he chose not to play for them.
Chose not to play for them, but he knew he was good enough, and boy did he know he was good enough, So he had that kind of confidence. And he, of course, always felt that he should have been the captain, ahead of Kardar. And Kardar was another headstrong kind of character. But you had these 2 or 3 guys in that team who really like had this kind of innate confidence in them, which carried the rest of the squad, because the rest of them really were like not bumpkins, I would say, but really fresh, young, green behind the ears types. Hanif was very young, and Khalid Mahmood, Khalid Wazir, all these guys were really young. And so you needed somebody like Fazal. And so, they were only 1 down. The key thing was that they were, because of rain, after the first 3 tests, they were only 1 down somehow. But they had been smacked all over the park. They hadn't really competed that much. They had been smacked all over. But they were at the stage now. They thought that we need to say something, we need to do something, because otherwise people are going to think we're just like a nothing team. And so it is completely and totally outrageous, but completely in line with the kind of guy that Fazal Mahmood was. One of the one of the funniest stories, Fazal Mahmood, when he was alive, in the 70s or 80s, apparently he turned up at a fast bowling camp one day when Imran was also there. Imran was overseeing a camp, and Imran was at his peak. So this must have been early 80s, I think. And Fazal Mahmood turns up and says, "Yeah, in my day, you guys, you get tired. I used to bowl 20, 25 overs at 85, 89, 90 miles an hour." And Imran and everyone was like, "Oh, Fazal Paji, how do you know speed guns and all?" Yeah, we don't need speed guns. We just knew. Like Fazal Mahmood just knew he was barely faster than Richie Beno, like he was like leg cutter, a bit like Kumble, maybe a little bit faster than Kumble at his quickest. He was like that. But of course, with Imran and all in the presence, 89, 90 miles an hour. What do you young kids do? I think he had that kind of crazy confidence,
But yeah,
Fazal.
that's the thing, right? So there is this temptation to draw a straight line from Fazal to Imran to Wasim to Waqar to Asif to Amir to whoever, Nasim Shah maybe even. But that's each one was their own style. I mean, Fazal wasn't as quick, but had this amazing leg cutter that he could
Mm.
bowl, especially on matting wickets and destroy sides, and also this great stamina where he could bowl 45 overs a day if required. So that complexity can easily get missed when you talk about the history of Pakistan pace
Yeah,
bowling.
absolutely. I don't think actually, and I've done it as well, and you can draw a link, like you say, but from right from Fazal down to Sarfraz and then Imran and all. But actually, the link starts mostly the effect starts mostly from Imran. It was Imran who really took it to another level, because not just because of his bowling, of course, because he was phenomenal on the field, but like the impact that he had as a guy, as a figure, as a public figure, great looking guy, and just has this amazing glamorous lifestyle in England. And if you're a fast bowler, then you can become this, for example. I think the link between Fazal and then Sarfraz and Imran is a lot more tenuous than it is from Imran thereafter. Uh,
Okay, okay.
Fazal, like Imran says, of course, that I did remember Fazal Mahmood's bowling. Um, I remember being told about it, because Imran was born in 52, I think, and Fazal would have done this in 54. So Imran said that I do remember being told about it, and that was amazing. And I remember Fazal as a character, as a public figure in life generally. But he was basically his own man. Like he built himself up purely by himself, and he's a master of reinvention. Imran, in life now as well as a politician, but also as a cricketer, is like an absolute master of renovating himself, reinventing himself, changing himself. The action. One of my aims in my journalistic life is to do make this like kind of make this GIF of all of Imran's actions that he had, starting with he had this really windmilly, flat, no jump action, which only allowed him to bowl in swingers, to get that like jump, that magnificent jump that he had. So he reinvented himself, and so what he finally became, I think that was like the takeoff point in the pace history, really. Because in fact, I did this research in the book. Before Imran, Pakistan's domestic scene was, and really now even now it's populated by left arm spinners. Iqbal Qasim is the true Pakistan cricketer, not Imran Khan so much. He like your top 10 bowling charts, your top 10 averages in domestic cricket before Imran, and even during Imran, but it started to change a bit after Imran. But until Imran, it was all left arm spinners.
So
Left arm
it's
spinners,
like
the occasional off break.
so it's the original Bangladesh then.
The original. This is the thing. And I think Bangladesh broke off because they were like, no, we have better left arm spinners. We are going over there. We're going to form our own country, and we're going to be better than you at left arm
So
spin.
the battle was against left arm spin, not against
I
anything
think
else.
so. It was a battle of ego over left arm spin. Ours is better than yours, and it is, because nobody's left arm spin is better than Bangladesh's left arm spin. Like nobody's. So so Imran was the real like kind of kick. That produced guys like then you had Aqib, you had Wasim Waqar obviously, and Amir Nazir, and so many came from that, and then it kind of has become self-perpetuating from then onwards. But like the care that Imran took of his body and of his cricket, that has not been replicated, either by the PCB or the fast bowlers who have come since. That's a separate different topic altogether, I think.
Yeah. So talking about Imran, I mean, of course, there's a lot between the in the 50s and the 60s that's in the book. There's also, in a way, a very, very good administrative history of Pakistan cricket. So everyone should read about how things were structured, how a young country goes about, organizing its cricket, what the advantages, the pitfalls, etc. But talking about Imran, we have to get to Sydney in '77, which you know. People, of course, these days may think of Imran, think of the '92 World Cup, a few other things, but '77 was where it effectively began.
Yeah.
And that must have been some test. I mean, I did have Nadeem Farooq Paracha on our podcast, and he spoke about how, for him as a youngster growing up, that was just something else, because Pakistan TV actually showed that final day's play.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
to get up and watch it and see Pakistan win a test in Australia with what Asif Iqbal did, what Imran did,
Yeah.
must have been
Majid.
Majid must have been
Yeah.
heady.
It's like I think there was like a combination of things happening then, because also in the book, there was a pay dispute happening around that time.
Oh yeah,
Leading
Mushtaq
players,
Mohammed and
Mushtaq Mohammed, Asif Iqbal. So these guys became like the superstars. That concept of the superstars of cricket came, because before then, the team was an honest team full of good players, but not like stars. And these guys came, they played county cricket, and they were like, hey, we deserve more money. Like, you're paying us a pittance to play for Pakistan. Basically, the kind of disputes that you see now as well. That was like the procedure. So I think, that happened. There was a lot of pressure on all of them to perform. And I think they pushed themselves like to really do as much as they could in that series. And it was a good side. It was a genuinely good side. Imran had just seminal moment for him was that entire tour, basically, where he just, until then, as a bowler, he'd been kind of thinking that, okay, should I be, I think he had like a Stephen Finn problem, to make it more current, in that he wasn't sure whether he should be an out and out fast bowler or whether he should just cut down a pace a little bit and try and swing the ball a bit more and be accurate. He had that kind of issue. And, he decided in one of the tour matches, I think against Queensland, he said that to hell with this. I'm sick and tired, because he played county cricket by then, of course, and he felt it was so constrictive, and like, everyone was telling him, okay, no, use the swing, slow down a little bit, use the swing, just concentrate on your line and length. And he was like, screw this crap. When I play county cricket, I need to slow down. And then when I go to Pakistan, the pitches are dead and I can't do anything there. So I'm just going to bowl fast. And in that Queensland game, he started bouncing Chappell and all these guys. And he just he was like, I got angry and I started bowling. Took 5 wickets in the second innings when he decided that I'm going to bowl fast. Took an expensive 5-4, but he took a 5-4. And then he said, in Sydney, I'm going to go with this. I'm just going to keep going like this. And he had, so many little things coming. He had a supportive captain, Mushtaq Mohammed, who, Imran was being warned for bouncers. And I think the umpire said to Mushtaq, the famous way he said to Mushtaq that, tell him that he can't bowl another bouncer. And so Mushtaq went up to Imran and said that, don't bowl a bouncer for 2 balls, but on that 3rd ball, give him another bouncer and just get him good. And Imran, of course,
and Imran didn't even listen to him.
Imran didn't even listen to him. He bowled 3 bounces in a row. So it was these things coming together that you had a kind of captain who understood and, who could give it back to the Aussies as well. All those things came together, and then the batting kind of finally freed itself. I think it was really important that, guys like Asif Iqbal, who was, Pakistan's man for crisis, and Majid Khan, Javed was in that side as well. Harun Rashid had a good kind of coming of age in that series against Dennis Lee. I think a lot of these things came together, and the fact that these guys were understanding their skills and being recognized and being paid and fighting for their rights. I think all that came together to produce that performance in that test match, with, of course, Imran at the very forefront of it. And it's a pivotal moment in Pakistan's history, not only for the results and stuff, but also for the kind of style that they started playing with. Fast bowlers and attacking batsmen and, making mistakes and stuff, but having enough talent to kind of, to win enough games.
Have you been able to see more of it than that little clip that is on YouTube?
No, unfortunately, no. It's really difficult to find any more of it. And, but the thing I find, and maybe you found this as well, the thing I find disappointing, like I wrote about it as well. I found footage of the great 87-88 series, Pakistan West Indies. But man, watching the footage, it's like 9 minutes of footage or something from the final test. It just seemed like, this is cricket from a different century. And it is, literally. But it felt so like just amateur.
Yeah, and the aura gets stripped off.
Yeah, and you could tell, like, Abdul Qadir is bowling like 6 feet outside leg stump on the final day when Pakistan is trying to win a test match. And you're thinking, how do I square this with like the great Qadir and Imran's great attacking captaincy when he's telling him to bowl 6 feet outside leg stump from around the wicket, to prevent whatever. And they're constantly running around the ball in the field and not running at the ball, which arguably Pakistan still do anyway. But you feel like it kind of stripped it off for me. So I wouldn't want to watch, I don't think, too much. There's more footage of Pakistan series right after that, which was against the West Indies, which was another great series.
That I've
Pakistan
seen.
lost 2-1. Yeah, there's some bits in that which you think, this is great cricket. But even then, you kind of feel like, I mean, it feels
No, but
like pretty amateurish compared to now.
no, but Wasim Raja, I was happy to see.
Yeah, Wasim Raj, yes,
Helmetless,
exactly.
playing the
Yes,
fast
yes.
bowlers.
I feel like
That
the
comes
bowling, I'm
through.
not so happy to see. The batting, I don't mind because you still play nice shots and recognizable things. But I feel like the bowling is really at a different level now in terms of just fit and also just how the game is covered now. Like you've never seen such granular coverage of cricket as we do now. I guess on a daily basis.
Yeah, and I'm imagining like 30 years later, people looking at this and saying, "Hey, what is this? What nonsense are these
Absolutely, man.
people? Why are these
Absolutely.
people hyping it up so
Why,
much and all
why
that?"
is AB de Villiers such a non-athlete? Stuff like that. Like, why is he such a non-athlete? What's wrong with him? Is he not fit enough? Like, hello.
The best, my favorite bit though of that little anecdote that you mentioned, when Mushtaq Mohammed goes and tells Imran, give him two balls full, and then Imran doesn't even listen to him and bowls three bouncers and then hits Lily, and
And
then
then
Javed
Javed.
Miandad. So Lily basically falls down. I think he's on the
Yeah,
ground,
yeah.
and Javed Miandad is standing over him and saying, "Are you enjoying it?"
Because Javed is such a character, man. So on that, Javed couldn't, like, at that time he wasn't so comfortable with English and stuff. He had just come into the dressing room. He just made his debut the year before. Although he was like hyped up, he had confidence, of course. So he had picked up a little bit of English here and there, and he enough to like sledge basically. And I think he had made a decision that why should I sledge in Urdu? Because they won't understand it. So I have to make an effort to like sledge in English so that they understand it and they know that I'm sledging them. And one of the greatest things, again, it's in the book, on that tour, was a story Iqbal Qasim told me that, because these guys were becoming big superstars, so they used to carry around, at that time, it was a real status thing that, Asif Iqbal and Majid Khan, when they were moving between hotels or whatever, they used to carry a briefcase with them, like a leather briefcase, in which it was assumed that they kept important documents like county contracts and, whatnot, and this and that, shusha, because they're important people. And Javed saw this. So this is Iqbal Qasim telling the story. Javed saw this, and Javed was like, and he was new. And he's like, why don't I get myself a briefcase also? And so he got himself a briefcase and started carrying it around on that tour, like them. And so Iqbal Qasim was like, Salah, but what have you got to keep in your briefcase? You're not even a player yet. And Javed was like, I've got my Quran in here. That was it. He just had his Quran, one pen and a Quran, and that was it. He was walking around with the briefcase because I want to also show status and all. It tells you everything about Javed that you need to know, basically. Like never one on the back foot, huh? Never coming slowly, always coming full pace.
But you did meet him for this book, right? The interview that
Yeah,
you have in this book, that encounter that you have, it's very funny in a way because Javed is on his own trip, it seems like. But you do
always.
mention the thread that comes through in that interview and also in his career is that of Izzat.
Yeah,
It seems that Izzat is the leitmotif, so to speak, of what he wanted.
yeah,
And I
absolutely.
think, yeah.
It drove him in a very different way. For example, like Imran and all, of course, also wanted, the honor of being recognized for what they're doing for Pakistan, for making Pakistan a better side. But I think with Miadad, somebody like Miadad, it was mixed in with some innate insecurity about their place in life, and also to do with the way the game was. Miadad was one of the first kind of non good school, private school boys who went through university, government college, Islamia College in Lahore, and then came out from like upper middle class families, as Pakistan's teams had been until then. Javed was one of the first guys to really kind of break through that mold and come in from fairly normal background, but not like educated to the level that others were. And so I think it came from a bit of insecurity in those early years that he he he'll never admit it, but I think he found that team like something that he wanted to aspire to, but also be intimidated by. But that kept driving him, that I need to prove myself, I need to prove myself, I need to prove myself, and if somebody offends me, then I need to like doubly prove myself. So then he had the scrape with Lily on the 81 tour when he and that was actually, Javed gets a bad rap for that because it was actually Lily who started it. It's Lily who made the first kick just because Javed was batting well. Lily kicked out at him first when he was running a single, and it was only then that Javed started to kind of fight back. But he was driven
And that
by like,
photograph where Javed is holding his bat and trying
it's
to.
incriminating, right? It shows like Javed is the aggressor, but it misses the kick, and that's
Yeah.
available on video. I think Rob Linda has put that video up. giving Lily as good as he gets. Lily started that by kicking him. And the commentators, I think Tony Gray called it out at the time as well, that Lily should not be doing that. But it drove Javed, and it still drives him. The funniest thing about it is that even after everything that he's achieved, the greatest batsman in Pakistan, from Pakistan, he's still arguably the greatest to have come out of Pakistan. Yunus and all have come and gone and everyone's there, but I think Javed probably for a lot of people still ranks as the greatest. But it still drives him. And I think again, these insecurities that you have, that you didn't come from the background of Oxbridge, and you didn't study in Oxford like Kardar did, or like Imran did, or like Majid Khan did, and all these guys. And I think it's defined him, and it is who he is now. And if it wasn't part of him, then he might not have been the player that he was. It's almost as simple as that. The greatest thing about that meeting, though, and I wrote about it, was, so we were chatting, and Pakistan's 2000. This was the 2010. The spot fixing tour was happening before the spot fix happened. And while he was talking to me, he was sorting out airline tickets for a domestic staff of his, and sorting out some property issue in Lahore. So all these phone calls were coming in. He was sorting all this out, talking to me at the same time with the match on. And I kid you not, he predicted. So Salman Butt was batting, and Salman Butt had made 92. I think it was against the test against Australia, but in England in that summer. And Marcus North was bowling. And Javed's doing all these things, answering my questions about Izzat and everything also. And then says, "Abhi dekho, ye out hone wala hai, 2-3 ball mein." And I was like, okay, random, but whatever. I've got it recorded. He says, "Ye out ho jayega 2-3 ball mein." And literally like an over later, another over of Marcus North, Miandad said, "Abhi dekhna, he's going to fall over trying to play down the leg side, he'll be stumped." And like ditto happened exactly, because he had picked, while he was talking to me, while he was sorting out the world's problems, while he was like angry and talking about Izzat and how he never got the respect, he had picked that Marcus North was targeting Butt stumps. He was trying to get him to fall over, and he had been doing it for like 2 or 3 overs, and eventually he did get him, but tried to flick a ball, missed it, overbalanced, fell out the crease, and off with the bails behind him, stumped, gone. And I was like, whatever else anyone says about you, whatever innings you have not played in your life, this proves that you are the greatest man on the planet. He just, like, the way he did it, he was like a brain, man. Like, the guy, the way he thinks, even like the way he used to think about the game, just on a different level, I think.
So his brain was a computer. It's a fact.
Like he says, I don't need a laptop. When I was a coach, I don't need a laptop. My brain is a computer. And like, you kind of think that, for the stuff that he did on the field, Chappelli is a hard man to please sometimes, right? Chappelli, like players and all that, he gets impressed by. But one of the things I remember about Chappelli, he talks about a game Miandad captained in the absence of Imran, a one-day game against the West Indies, where Pakistan were defending literally like 108. And Chappelli says that to this day, like Miandad's captaincy, to basically West Indies won by 1 wicket in the end. They chased it down with like 2 overs to spare or whatever, but only 1 wicket in hand. Chappelli says that, it was literally Miandad's captaincy in the field and his bowling changes that got that game so close. And so like he was like phenomenal on a field. He could read things. You could see it in his batting sometimes. Again, it's another scene that I've described, 2 scenes in the book on him. Is one where he does that. I'd never seen it before in my life. I think people have done it since, but and you may have seen it, but like the no-look pass in basketball, when he did a no-look throw
in
the Hamilton Test of '93, which like missed it by this much. He missed a direct run out, and nobody was watching. Like, nobody clicked what he was doing. Picked up the ball at mid-wicket and just went like this. And I was like, how, to think of something like that? It's just, there's something innate, I think, in you, in the way you see the game. And I think possibly you see the game differently to how other people see it.
I would
some of the greatest captains, I think, and some of the greatest players, they see the game differently to how others see it. And then so they act differently to what other people do and stuff. And the other scene, of course, was that shot of Alan Donald that he plays, where he telegraphs it by looking towards the point gap. And this is, Donald at his peak, Miandad very much past his peak, and just moves away to this Yorker that's coming in, and it's a Donald Yorker, so it's quick and it's accurate, and he just glides it past exactly that gap for 4. and it just like, to me, it just like defined him better than anything apart from the briefcase story, perhaps, where it just defined him, that this is what he was as a cricketer. Like, and if he had given, I'm convinced that if he had given as much attention to his leg spin bowling as he did early in his career, he would have been a great leg spinner as well.
Yeah, in the 75 World Cup, he was
Yeah.
bowling a lot of leg spin, right?
Yeah. And he was a good leg spinner. Like, domestic level, he was a good leg spinner. And if he'd been able to give it as much attention, of course, as he did his batting, then he would have been a very good leg spinner as well. Like, just an amazing character and an amazing cricketer.
Yeah. So two things. Miandad shot was in East London, right? When he made that 100.
93.
Probably his final 100 or something.
It was his last international 100. Yeah, last international.
Yeah.
100.
So that is on
107.
YouTube, and Osman's written about it in his book as well. Was it past Rhodes? Of all the fielders, he decided to go past
it was
John
exactly
Rhodes.
past Rhodes. It was exactly. Imagine, like, to off Donald, past Rhodes, when you're like 30. He must have been, so that's 93 June, and he's 58. So he was like 36 at that time. Which at that time, now we think 36. Okay, you play on, but that was, Miandad was well past his peak. He was gone, and I know he came for the 96 World Cup and all, but he was well past it. But to be able to play that, and that was 100, 107, to be able to play that shot and to telegraph it like that was just, it's just insane. Like, Donald's running in and he looks at that gap. He's like, okay. Like, when Donald is running into you, you only look at Donald running into you. You don't look at like gaps here and there. You do that before he starts his run up, So just an amazing brain. And
I also think he doesn't get that much credit for his captaincy, because the fact is that whenever Imran came back, Javed always gave up the captaincy. Yeah. But when Imran was not there, he captained, which means that he was captaining a side without Imran, without his best player, and yet doing well. And when the best player came back, he gave up. He was like fine enough to give up.
He did many things. He was so pragmatic also, in that. Imran was, of course, no, I will play pace bowlers, because, even though pitches in Pakistan are slow, I am pace, and pace.
Pace is pace, yaar.
Pace is pace, yeah. Miandad was like, Sara, I'll play 3 spinners. I'll play Abdul Qadir, Iqbal Qasim, and Tawseef Ahmed together, and let's see what Australia or England can do. Nothing. Ghanta, they can do anything. And so, the series wins over Australia in 88. People forget, but that was a good series win, and he played with like 3 spinners. One Wasim Akram and Mudassar Nazar opening for like 2, 3 overs. And then take over with your spin strategy, so stuff like that. And that was, I think, him recognizing that Pakistan's strength actually has been spin bowling. And the strength of it's it's only as strong as its weakest spinner, basically, Pakistan cricket, in that sense. So I think he recognized that, and he went with it. And it brought him success. He has a great captaincy record as well.
And even in the 1987 Bangalore test, he was the one who pitched for Iqbal Qasim. And not Abdul Qadir.
Exactly, because he'd seen that India was playing Qadir well, and he realized, I think, that what they needed really was some control, which, of course, Kaka Iqbal Qasim would bring. He would bring that control. But of course, the key bit of advice in that test is that great story from Bishan Bedi, right, who said to them that don't try and spin it too much or whatever.
He said he said the biggest threat on a turning wicket is the straight ball.
Is the straight ball, which is also genius, like absolute genius, right? Because you wouldn't have ever thought of it like that, in that sense, with that clarity, you wouldn't think of it. So Miandad, in that sense, he, and I think very much on the field, which Imran acknowledges also, in his more reflective moments. Imran does acknowledge that Miandad on the field was the guy who did the nuts and bolts for him. Like, the field placings, even the batting order at times, it was Miandad. And like some of Miandad's innings in that 92 World Cup, people talk about Wasim's bowling and Imran's captaincy, but Miandad was like the rock throughout that World Cup. And his innings in that semi-final, like people talk about Inzi, of course, but without Miandad, you're not winning that game. Like the way he calculated that chase and the running between the wickets, it's just phenomenal. It's for a reason that Dean Jones was so inspired by his running, by Miandad's running or whatever. He was phenomenal. Him and Asif Iqbal, of course. But in that 92 World Cup, like, he sometimes gets overlooked, which for a guy who was the second highest scorer behind the great Martin Crowe, 550s in 8 matches, it takes some doing to like overlook that kind of contribution.
Yeah, I would love to have Miandad and Dhoni have a chat. at some point of time and be the fly on the wall on that chat.
Yeah. You'd have to
And
leave them alone just to talk cricket, basically. I think you'd have to
yeah,
leave
and
them alone.
ideally it should be when a match is on. So the TV should be
I
on.
swear,
These
man.
two should be watching it, and you should just be able to, observe that conversation.
These are the things about like the things that I loved most about Dhoni was, like we were saying earlier, it's the way they see the game is completely different. So he doesn't see any problem with sticking his leg out to stop a ball from going for byes. He doesn't see any problem with that. He doesn't see any problem in not having the give to go back for stumping and instead actually move forward. He doesn't see any. He sees sense in that, which is completely counterintuitive, of course. But that's what kind of sets them apart, which is why I think, I think Pakistanis love Dhoni as well as much because of that, because I think he reminded them in many ways of guys like Miandad, who, had just a different way of looking at the game completely.
Yeah. So from Miandad, of course, and we've 92, we have to talk about the star of this book. Some of Osman's most evocative writing is when he writes about Wasim Akram. And I guess, I mean, it obviously has to do with a personal, a connection as well. Was he your favorite cricketer?
Like absolute hero growing up. Absolute. There was one other guy who was a Saudi footballer, Majid Abdullah, who was like the first desert Pele. Because everyone gets named something Pele or whatever, like the subcontinent Pele, desert Pele, Indian Pele, Pakistani, whatever. So Majid Abdullah was like my first true sporting hero and love. Great player. But Wasim Akram was, just the guy. And the first thing was that it was physical thing. Like I thought this is what good-looking guys should be like. You should have that bouffant hair. You should be thin. You should be tall. And one of like the earliest favorite stories was that my cousin in Pakistan, he was where he lived in this place in Karachi called Bahadrabad. It's a really nice locality. He was walking down the road. My cousin was walking down the road to go to the barber's, which was just like a 5-minute walk away. The barber was called Standard. Great, and they used to ask you stuff like, "Sir, मैं आपको punk disco haircut दूं या rock haircut दूं," like stuff like that. They were like with it.
Niche.
And so he one day saw Wasim Akram walking to the same barbers to get a haircut from there.
Are you serious?
So Wasim Akram, so this was like 86, 87. So Wasim Akram early days, like getting there, but not a star yet. And he saw Wasim and he's like, "I need his autograph." So he went to Wasim just before he stepped into the shop. He said, "Wasim, Sibai, I need your autograph. Can you please wait here for like 5 minutes? I'm just going to run back to the house, get my bat, and come back." And, instead of Wasim saying that, "Okay, I'll be inside the shop. I'll go inside and I'll be getting my haircut," Wasim said, "I'll wait right here for you outside the shop." And so he waited outside the shop. My cousin ran back to the house, got his bat, came back. Wasim signed it outside the shop. And then they both went into the shop anyway to sit with them, each getting their haircut. It's like, but so a little story like that. But Wasim was like, he had this, like, he was cool. Like he didn't have to be. And I think there's a great, the most accurate, I think, description again. And, we were fanboying over Rahul, but Rahul again wrote about it when he wrote about that, the Dravid ball.
Yeah.
He wrote about it for Cricket Monthly in one of the juries out. Yeah. And he the hook of the piece was that he wrote it without watching the ball again. So he wrote it purely from his memory of the day when he saw that ball at his friend's house, and they had kali dal on toast or something, and that was like a theme throughout it. But he described Wasim Akram as like these long lanky arms. He basically said he was looking like the 90s, 70s Amitabh Bachchan, Zanjeer, angry, lanky kind of long arms and lanky, channeling like the 70s Amitabh in it. Because he had that kind of left-handed lankiness and like tall and long legs and not like gym fit at all, but like lean and lanky. And so he had this charisma from the start, and it was impossible not to love him. And then of course, then he started doing things like, I remember that same uncle that I talked about in Saudi telling me 2 days very close to each other that he had taken a hat trick in Sharjah. Took the first hat trick, then a few months later he took another hat trick in the Australasia Cup final. And I was like, wow, this Wasim Akram must be really good, man. So, building from that and then watching him in that 87 tour, I had seen the Headingley test. He made a really swashbuckling 43. He'd broken Ian Botham's toe, which of course, like, how can you not love him for that? With a big booming Yorker and all. So, even before like the bowling and stuff, there was just like his presence, which I think for my generation, he was like the Imran, And I can imagine that people slightly older than me might have grown up thinking the same about Imran Khan when Imran Khan was coming through. And we saw Wasim, and of course there was more TV at that time. There was more magazines, so he'd be pin-up poster, he'd be in ads. He was in this one ad about a public service ad about not smoking, even though of course he is like the biggest smoker known to mankind or whatever. But he was in this public service ad saying, "Nahi, cigarette आपके लिए बहुत खराब, आपकी सेहत के लिए बहुत नुकसानदेह," and all this and that. But so he was there, and he had this long bouffant hair and stuff, and so he naturally was the guy that you attached yourself to when you're supporting that team. And then it turned out that he was actually this incredibly sophisticated genius of a bowler, and this came later. This came in like the from the mid early to mid 90s. He started really expanding his range of bowling, and then he started doing things, and he hit his peak, I feel, in like 96 onwards, 97 onwards, for 3 years. 3 years pretty much. He was not at his peak as a bowler maybe, but he was at his peak as a genius of what he could do. So the figures in that phase of his career might not be as amazing as the figures in his early 90s or whatever, but like what he could do with the ball at that stage, like he was just having fun with batsmen sometimes. And the amazing thing was how many things he could be. So he could be like this smart, intelligent bowler who did so much, but he could also be like just a downright nasty piece of work. And if he wanted to start bowling short at you, then oh my god, watch out, because with that angle and that arm, he would be hitting you up here all the time, or right in the side of your head and stuff. And it was impossible not to love him, because he was in all of Pakistan's signature moments. He was right there. He did the one thing that everyone wanted to do, which was to bowl fast. He put an earring on. He was a player. He had an earring in '92, and everyone was like, "Oh, how can he have an earring?" And we were like, "So cool, man! So cool! Well done, Waz." Even like after he became captain fairly young in '92, and he got kicked out of the captaincy by his own team, that only increased like your love for him, because he was like, "Oh, look, poor guy. Like the whole team hates him. He's on his own or whatever." So he was just like the predominant figure, much more than Waqar, by the way. Waqar was doing amazing things with the ball, of course, but I was very much in the Wasim camp. Like there was absolutely zero doubt in my head.
Yeah, and that 87 footage that we spoke about in West Indies, that one bowler who you can see even there
is Wasim.
Wasim bowling to Richards and all those guys.
And he bowls him.
He was quick, and he was something.
And he was like, even then he was modern. Like, so if you watch him now in that footage, he was doing things that modern fast bowlers do. So he went around the wicket, he worked the angle into the batsman rather than just going across him and stuff. You could see those things. And so at that time, you can see how people were like, this guy is the future. You could see that this guy is bowling something that is ahead of its time, which he really was, and of course he had like Imran's stamp of approval, right? Imran was like, I have never seen anything like him. He is the biggest talent to come out of Pakistan. And when you saw him, in almost in hindsight now, you also like, you see some of his older spells and you see what he's trying to do and stuff, and you really appreciate and you realize that you missed out on a lot of things even when you were growing up watching him, because maybe you didn't watch the game that way at that time. Now you watch it as journalists, you watch it with a bit more of an analytical eye. It weighs a bit heavier on you because you have to notice things, you have to see things, whereas you didn't before. And so you see a lot of the things that he does, now you see it and you still think that, god damn, man, this guy was like a genius with the ball. And like little things, that he did. And I asked him about this. Like, so when he used to just come up to release, so it'd be like a little tap on the ball as he was going into his delivery.
So the middle finger would just come off a bit.
Just a little bit. He would like almost tap the ball. And I asked him that, like, why do you do that? Why did you do that? And he, of course, pretended that, I don't remember, so long ago, kaise sawal pooch rahe ho, itne purane. And then I pestered him. He's like, acha batata hu. Basically, it was when he was putting a little bit more effort into the ball to get more speed. I don't know whether it helped him to gather the ball or to, grip it better maybe, or just to make him feel confident that the ball was the right grip. But he says that I used to do it when I was bowling my faster ball, which like these little things that you start appreciating about him. The way he was explaining how he bowled his slower balls to me and how he discovered how to bowl the slower ball. He learned it actually from Franklin Stephenson, the great,
in Lancashire, in the county. Yeah,
exactly. In county cricket, he learned it from him basically, because, he hadn't really appreciated it before and stuff. So, things like that, there was just so much to his bowling, such a range to his bowling, that even now I'm convinced that, if I go back and watch over some of his spells, there'll be a million things that I'll pick up and think, oh man, like, how did I not see this, back then? How did I not see this? How did I not realize this? And it's amazing he has that kind of impact he has on a lot of people, I think, as a guy. Like, a lot of young cricketers even now say that, Waz was the guy that I used to watch. And like, it's remarkable that somebody like Mitchell Stark, for example, name checks somebody like Wasim Akram even now, even though Wasim Akram hasn't played now for like 17, 18 years, nearly 2 decades in which that he hasn't played. It's crazy the impact that he left. So yeah, I mean, it was a no-brainer that he was the guy to like kind of idolize. Absolutely.
And also that he two things worked in his favor, right? One, he was part of very much part of the TV age. So 80% of his bowling happened when everyone got to watch TV around the world, and so you can see some of his great spells. And the other thing that also worked in his favor was he was the bowler of magic balls.
Yeah.
And there are great bowlers who bowl great spells and get wickets, but then you have this guy who can bowl a magic ball a match. And you were starting with Dravid in 99, Croft. I mean, you even ask him, was Dravid your best ball? And then he brings up all the other examples that he has.
Maybe.
Alan Lamb.
There were a few, maybe. Like, and you're like, what? Are you serious? And it's such a good point, because he literally, and it felt like that he could produce it on demand sometimes. That now I'm bored, I'll just bowl this one. I think
2 in the World Cup final.
2 in the World Cup final. And Mahela said it, actually, because Mahela was, where did I read this? Somewhere recently somebody pointed it out. I think maybe Vitushan was telling me. Mahela was saying it on commentary, in fact, that he was the hat-trick one. He was the final hat-trick victim of one of Wasim's test hat-tricks. I think Wasim's first test hat-trick, which was against Sri Lanka. He was the final victim, and it was an outswinger that Mahela kind of chased. And it looked like an airy-fairy Mahela shot. He chased and it went to slip, great catch, hat-trick, done. And Mahela explained it on commentary, saying that actually, people think it was a bad shot, but in the first innings, he had done me with one that had swung back in, like a long way, and he got me for duck as well. And so I was kind of guarding against that and thinking, okay, yes, Salah, if this is, coming back in even a little straight, I'm just going to go for it or whatever. And then apparently Wasim came up to him afterwards, really, really patronizingly put his hand on his shoulder. And Mahela said, hey, Vazbhai, you got me first innings in swinger, second innings out swinger. And Wasim apparently just said, ha, 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 you'll learn, boy, you'll learn. It's like, he must have done that to so many batsmen here. And, like that Dravid delivery, of course, it's been written about so much. And, you can think of all kinds of things, like Dravid wasn't at his peak then, right?
No, not yet.
He was getting there.
Yeah.
He had an impressive record, but he wasn't at his peak. But, and the ball, that SG ball, I think Wasim says, on that series, the ball was swinging more, the batch of balls that they were swinging more and stuff. But still, to work somebody like Dravid out that way, like, and to do it in the way that he did it, it's just like, I don't think any other bowler really would be capable of producing the kind of delivery, especially given the 2 balls that had preceded it. Right?
Exactly. It's not just the ball, right? It's what came before.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it even more amazing. It's like you not only got him with a magic ball, you set him up.
And you had, in fact, had there been DRS, you would have got him on the first ball of that, because, he was LBW. Yeah. Shastri Vichara on commentary saying that, he's very lucky to have survived that one. You're damn right he was lucky, he was plumb. He was pretty much plumb. But, and I think the thing about it, because the footage is grainy, but I distinctly remember, and there might have been some discussion in the commentary about it in that match. I think one of the problems was that you could not pick from how he was releasing and the way the seam was kind of canted, you couldn't pick which way the ball would go. So, if you're thinking like, if you're Dravid, you're thinking that, okay, this ball is coming, even if it's like 83, 84 miles an hour, maybe not peak Wasim pace, but 83, 84, it's going to land on a good spot. I know that much. But where the hell will it go? Like, after that, where the hell will it go? If you have no idea at that stage, then what are you going to do? You can only pray and hope that it misses the stumps or it misses your edge. And, it leaves you and that's it. But to get it that right,
I spoke to a couple of Pakistani players about that who played in that match, and they said Wasim Akram and Saqlain Mushtaq were bowling at like the peakest of the peak.
Yeah.
Like they said, we couldn't have played against that. Nobody could have played against that.
Yeah.
But the fact that Tendulkar made 136 that day,
That
I
tells you
think
about the innings, man.
enhanced that his reputation so
Yeah.
much. Like Azhar Mahmood, who I spoke to, was a substitute that day. He said to make 100 on that day against Wasim Akram and Saqlain Mushtaq, you must have been some batsman.
Like I was saying earlier, so Wasim, everyone remembers Wasim, the reverse swing from like the late 80s, early 90s, 92 series against England and all. That's when all the crazy collapses. A lot of people remember that. But people forget, and he was quicker then. He was much quicker then. But like his late peaks that he had from 97 to 2000, which includes in 1999, he was at a different peak. Then he was maybe not as consistently quick, but he was doing more things with the ball. He wasn't relying on reverse that much by then. He was doing things with the new ball, with the old ball, with the middle overs ball. He was, at a different level. And Saqlain, of course, was at his peak. That was like the 96 to 99 Saqlain is, he was bowling better, or he was at least more successful than Shane Warne across formats, and he was up there among like Warne and Kumble types at that time. So that Tendulkar century, I mean, it gets a bad rep for it coming in a loss and for the sins of the batsman after him. But like that was some innings, man. That was some like insane innings. If he had won it, then my God.
Yeah, if he had won it, I can see it being like top 5, like of all time kind of stuff.
Absolutely. Especially because, like you said, Wasim and Saqlain, that was, and like Waqar
and not to mention Waqar, but Waqar wasn't probably at his peak. Yeah.
But he was still Waqar, right?
He was still Waqar.
It's not like he's a joker. It's not like he's a joker or anything. So, I mean, that was like, that was amazing. And Wasim's bowling in that was just, oof. And then, he had his last kind of flowering that he had, the 2000 one against the West Indies. He took 11 in the Antigua test, and then he took another 6 wickets in one test against Sri Lanka right after that, where he scored a century as well. Even then, to watch him, it was just like, how are you doing this at the age of like, whatever, you're 36, 35, 36 now, and you're still, one of his magical balls is to Keith Arthurton in the 2000s.
Oh, yes.
One bends in so much. It's like a crazy amount of bend and late bend. It's just insane what he could do.
I mean, that's for a cricket writer, especially for a writer like you who has written so much. I mean, you can't get better, right? I mean, Wasim Akram is the subject you want to write about all day long.
Absolutely. I like, one of my biggest regrets is that I was not a bit older and that I could not have written about him while he was playing. Because imagine like to watch him bowl live in a great match. Just phenomenal. Like he's a writer's dream. That way he's and some of the best writing from around the world, not just from Pakistan, but from around the world, has been so much of the best writing has been. Selvi, I remember, wrote a lovely piece on Wasim. I think it was Selvi, in fact, who first anointed him left arm god.
Left arm of God.
Yeah, left arm god. I think it was Selvi who did it. Gideon once wrote a really nice piece about Wasim as well. So he brought out that kind of writing from everybody, just because he was ready-made. And then there was his batting as well, which nobody ever really writes about. But he could be a batsman when he wanted to be. The Lord's
Test my first memory of him is as a batsman, actually. Nehru Cup, when he came and hit that spinning six.
Viv Richards. Imagine Viv Richards bowling the last over of any chase. Yeah,
of a final.
I mean, that's some matchup there, right? There's some matchup thinking happening there. Like left armour, let's get the off break on. Why not left-handed batsman?
But I never asked you. Tell me the choice of the cover for this book. It does have Wasim Akram.
Yes.
But it's a very, very, very interesting photo because it has Wasim Akram in his one-day helmet, I think. His World Cup 92 helmet. It has, I think, Amir Sohail who is hugging him barefoot.
Asif Mujtaba.
And then Asif Mujtaba, and then is it Salim Malik or who?
Salim Malik from the back. Yes, Salim Malik.
Yeah. So what was this? Tell me about this choice. Very, very interesting.
This is, first of all, this is the 92 Lords Test.
Yeah.
Where Wasim won the test ultimately with the bat. 45 not out, I think.
Tense chase.
132 they were chasing, and it was Wasim and Waqar who won it with their 8th wicket stand. So they won by 2 wickets. So this was a celebration right after it. I had no idea for the longest time what picture I was going to use. I was thinking of some graphic, like, some green with a heartbeat. But so the name, the title, The Unquiet Ones, was Shruti Devi, who,
Shruti Devi,
agent to the stars. literary agent to the stars and of the stars, and the better half of Rahul Bhattacharya, of course. And the cover picture was also her. So she thought of the name and she found this photograph. Can you believe she found this photograph? And she's like, I think this is perfect. And I was like, oh my God, you're right. It is absolutely, because the barefoot thing clinched it, right? The barefootedness clinched it, because it captured something about like Pakistan, this I hate using the word jazba when we talk about Pakistani cricket, this passion, as if it only exists, like as if they only have the passion, right? As nobody else has passion and they only exist off this passion or whatever. But it did capture something of like the joy, I think, of watching Pakistan cricket, that the guy's got a stump in his hand. He's just as likely to impale someone with that stump in the next shot, as he is to like hold it up with something. And this one guy's just come out running barefoot, and this is at the home of cricket lords and all, and he's come out barefoot and all, like, look at this, what is it? So I just, and Amir Sohail actually had a really good Lords test. I think he got 76 in the first innings and a gritty 25 or 26 in the second.
He had a good series, that 92.
He had a good series, yes. He had that double 100 at Old
Double
Trafford as
100.
well. So both the title and the picture, both were like Shruti.
So you just spoke about Jazba, and so which brings me to I have to ask you about this probably your most viral piece ever that you wrote about the Hal of Pakistan. and yeah, that was a terrific piece, obviously, and I will link it, and you all should read it, about how this Pakistani tendency of coming back, of pulling games out of nowhere, especially on the field and all that. But you did write a piece in 2017 after Pakistan won the Champions Trophy, saying that, sort of looking back at Hal and thinking whether, one should be approaching cricket writing through that lens.
Yeah, or half debunking it at least. I tried. I like when I wrote Hal, it did come from a genuine place. I genuinely did want to understand why Pakistan do it. And maybe I think how I deluded myself was in thinking that they are the only side to do it. Or I ascribed some kind of exceptionalism to them in the act of doing it, which comeback victories happen a lot, all the time in all sports. There are great comeback victories, and sometimes they appear from nowhere, and sometimes they don't, or whatever. But I think what I did, but what that allowed me to do was to try and explore it in a very Pakistani way, to try and kind of get to the bottom of it in a way that would make sense for Pakistan, and why it worked for Pakistan. And the thing about that piece was, and the thing that I still stick to this day, is that a lot of the players that I spoke to, they kind of agreed, without articulating it in as many words or in that same way exactly. They kind of agreed that yes, when moments like that do come about, we generally did sense something in the field. And you can give it many words. You can call it momentum, you can call it grabbing the game by the scruff of its neck or whatever. I chose to go with Hal because
because of the musical connection.
Because of the musical. I guess I wanted to also write a little bit about the music and stuff, but that struck me as a more natural parallel than trying to find any other parallel anywhere. I could make sense of it more from music than I could from anything else. And I could have gone into more nerdy kind of sports science of it and spoken to like some sports scientists in some university and given it the good old Tim Wigmore treatment or something. I could have gone that way totally. I did speak to like sports scientists and all, but I felt like this was maybe a more approachable way of trying to understand. So I called up the Kawals and spoke to them about it, and they weren't great for interviews, but it was nice to just get a perspective from them about it. And then what happened, I think, over the years since then was I think the way we viewed the game started to change. And I think that's happened throughout cricket, like especially in T20, but it's happened to the entire cricket fraternity. It's like, you have your eyes and your mind have been opened up to a new way of looking at the game, where things are not sometimes as random as you may have thought them to be before. And things happen. And maybe they don't happen in every team to the level of detail that they do happen in some teams in T20 sides, but that there is a certain level of planning in almost everything that sports sides do, and that planning and that's increased.
And more data has come in.
And that's increased, and that's grown. And so through that lens, it was very easy to see Pakistan's Champions Trophy win as a Hal thing, which it kind of still was, by the way. There was still like, Bumrah's no ball, Hafiz, a ball hitting his wicket, but the bail not falling, Fakhr Zaman's innings, Amir, his one great performance post return and all. There was still an element of, hey, how did this happen? So, if Sarfraz hadn't been dropped twice, the easiest of catches in that Sri Lanka game, Pakistan wouldn't have even made it to the final. And then for Ruman Rais to come in for one match in the semi-finals to take Amir's place and do amazing against England, who were like, going to dominate. There was an element of like fortune to it and Hal or whatever, the things coming together. But I felt like, that in that situation, it was taking away a little bit from actually like the stuff that Pakistan had planned and had done well. So, for example, to bring Hassan Ali into the attack when they would, to use Shadab in the way that they were doing, to send Hafiz up, in that innings, Hafiz, or send him down rather, not have him at 1 down, but have him at 5, and to come and play in the death overs and stuff. Like these were things that they had planned. And so, I guess that piece was like more kind of doubting myself, second guessing myself and thinking that, oh, damn, what if all those players that I spoke to for that piece were actually just kind of, it was a bit of like affirmative behavior in which, if somebody says something to you, then you just kind of agree and go along with it. And actually, if you think, once you start thinking about it, it's not true. What if like those players had actually more of a plan than Waqar Yunus just saying, "Ke humne pakad liya aur bas wahin se nikal gaye," or what if there was actually more to it? And if you think in the time of Javed as captain, there must have been more thinking to these moments, right? There must have been more thinking to these moments. So it was kind of, I didn't want to fully debunk it, of course, because I still believe that something they do, even if it's momentum, they do grab it and use it in a different way and interpret it in a different way to other teams. That other teams would. So there is some level of uniqueness in what they do. But I did want to kind of rationalize it and not just leave Pakistan as this mercurial subject of Orientalism, that you can see them through this Orientalist kind of view, and to give them actually credit where it's due, that, they have done things, they do plan, and they're not just a bunch of, supremely talented village bumpkins who come in and suddenly ek mahal create hota hai aur haal ho jata hai aur wo aise ho jate hain. Like that, there is something about them that they do plan and stuff. So that second piece was like an acknowledgement that, the game has, the way we view the game has changed.
Yeah, though Hal still remains one of my favorite pieces because how wonderfully you drew in all the strands from music and everything else and brought it in. And I think, of course, the game has changed. Of course, there's more data and there's a lot of science, and there are ways to read it now. There are ways to read it like a computer program. But I think it's important for people to still write pieces like that, pieces like Hal, because there are others who view the game differently. And, a lot of people may watch T20 in one way or watch cricket in one way, but others watch it in other ways. And so I think that space is there.
And I think that the thing about the Hal thing also was that there was a lot of other elements that I brought into it, which, I still stand by today. Like I drew a parallel with Zulfikar Bhutto. In just the way that, Pakistan had this bluster about them, and a lot of it was bluff, a lot of it was bluster and stuff. And I think, those parallels, I think they still stand, in the way a Pakistani team is, and especially in the 90s, the way there was, guys like Ijaz Ahmed, who, on the field may have been like Imran Farhat, but in their heads they were like Don Bradman and all, like, that kind of, and they fooled you, they bluffed you into thinking that they were also, Don Bradman. And also, that is a Pakistani leadership trait for sure. So those kind of angles that I pulled in, I think, like, those still stand. I think those are still there. And how you react in a crisis and stuff. I think there is a Pakistani way of doing it. But yeah, it's just, I think you said it. Like, there are different ways in which you appreciate a game and in which you watch a game, and they arouse different emotions and reactions in you.
Yeah. So absolutely. So, okay. So I have taken up a lot of your time. I want to finish up with two things. One is we are talking about Pakistan. So I wanted to ask you for initially I said 5, but okay, let's keep it to 3. Your 3 favorite spells of fast bowling from Pakistan. You don't need to necessarily pick what you've seen. It could even be something you've researched from the past and you wish you had seen. But again, this is not like the 3 greatest spells or anything, just something that your favorites.
So one is definitely The 87 Headingley, Imran.
Okay.
Absolutely, like 10 wickets. Headingley in those days was still the big swinging wicket. And Imran is the first time I had actually seen, and he wasn't at his peak pace then, but it was the first time I had seen Imran still as a good bowler. And he just like the amount of swing he was getting. Again, I used to think that everyone must get this swing. Like if he's getting it, then everyone must be getting it. At the other end was like Neil Foster and David Capel, who weren't swinging the ball so much, but Imran was like banana, new ball swing, not even reverse. So he got a 10 for in that game, and amazing like the angles that he cut across Chris Broad. If you can imagine Imran bowling over the wicket to Chris Broad and getting him like caught behind with a ball that just touches his glove, going completely across him, like just phenomenal kind of bowling, crazy bowling. That was definitely one of my favorite spells. The second one, Asif in Kandy against Sri
Ah,
Lanka, that
okay.
entire test
Yeah.
match. I mean, Asif, like even over his, actually, you know what, a close second is probably Asif in Sydney, because I watched that live. I was in Sydney that morning. I was in Sydney for that test match, in fact, the famous 2010 test when Pakistan got
2010 collapse. Yeah.
the famous one. But I was there. I remember they used to have this, the first morning of a Sydney test, they have this breakfast for the members club or whatever. And Mike Coward had very kindly got me to speak at it. And one of the last questions before the test match started, and it was a delayed start because it was rain. And two or three guys said that, oh, you must be looking forward to Mohammad Amir bowling. Amir didn't play that test. He was actually injured, but we didn't know that at that point. It was only at the toss that we found out. You must be really excited, Mohammad Amir bowling on a green pitch like this. And I said, actually, much more than Amir, I'm looking forward to watching Mohammad Asif bowl, because in these conditions, he'll be lethal. And of course, Mohammad Asif came, took a six for Australia out for like 130 or whatever. And that's actually, that spell over Candy. He
That
was just
spell probably gets a bit overshadowed because of the defeat at the end.
because of the defeat. But he was like, the way the stuff that he did was like, it's how you picture Asif, like just making absolute fools of batsmen, not least Michael Clark. How he bowled him, it was amazing. The feeding him outswinger after outswinger, and then one in swinger which he tries to drive through the gate, bowled, and Asif just like, yeah, just get out of here. One of those celebrations like, yeah, whatever.
Chalo,
So
chalo,
Asif
chalo.
is there definitely with that Sydney. I think I'll go for Sydney. And I'm trying to think, the problem with Wasim is that which spell do you pick? He has to be there. He has to be there. Actually, okay, so I'll go for a joint third, which is almost any spell that Wasim has ever bowled in his life. But okay, if we're picking one, then personally, I remember, of course, the 2000 Antigua spell, the 11 wickets that he took in that match, mostly because, it was the end of his career. The Qayyum report had just come out the day before that test started. So, like the intense pressure on him. And what did he do? He turned up with like an 11 for in one of the greatest test matches of all time. So like Wasim balls to the rest of the world. This is what I'm going to do. So I love it for that. But also, actually, the other spell that I love as much and I remember as much is Shoaib against, and we haven't even spoken about Shoaib Akhtar, but anyway, his spell against New Zealand in 2003. I think it was, again, was it Hamilton or Christchurch, where again, Shoaib just out of nowhere turned like the game around, bowling. He had a very different reverse swing approach to like Wasim and Wakar. He wasn't, I don't know, he was much more, I don't think it was as much swing, but I think just the pace, and he was much more accurate with it. I felt like actually he would hit the stumps more times. I think he had more control over his Yorkers, his in swing, and the amount of swing. I think he had more control than Wasim did sometimes. At his peak, and in that spell, he just every ball was just phenomenal, and he turned that match around for Pakistan. I think New Zealand were like 90 for two, and a lead of like 260.
And collapse.
And then they were 111 all out or something, and Pakistan had 270 to chase. So it's still a big chase, but Inzamam and Yusuf somehow pulled off that chase, and Pakistan won by 7 wickets. But that match I stayed up to watch it as well, because it was New Zealand and I was in Pakistan at the time. So I stayed up, and I felt like for once in my life, it had paid off to stay up and watch cricket. It paid off, and sure, it was just like a phenomenal spread. Every ball 95 miles an hour and quick and swinging, and New Zealand just did not know what had hit them.
Yeah, I mean, Pakistan bowlers used to have New Zealand for breakfast back then, right? Mohammad
Imagine, and
Sami,
now Sami in the first test of that series only
Sami, yeah.
he had taken a 5 for, and then in 2000 on his debut he had taken 8 in his debut test
And then
against
he
the New
came and took a
Zealand and
hat
all.
trick in one day randomly and then beat
Yes,
them.
and in a test he's taken a hat trick in a
Yeah.
test as well. Like randomly
Yeah.
just picked up hat tricks here and there. So so many. But I definitely saw Imran, Asif at Sydney, Imran at Headingley, Asif at Sydney, and third would be joint Wasim at Antigua and Shoaib at. I think these are like defining kind of spells for me for fast bowling spells.
Yeah, and thankfully, I think we have quite a bit of them on YouTube. I don't know about Wasim and Antigua, but
Wasim and Antigua is on.
it's there.
Wasim and
Okay.
that test match is pretty well covered. The thing that is missing is of course the fluffed runouts when Jimmy Adams and Courtney Walsh were both at the same end, and the ball was thrown to Saqlain Mushtaq by Mushtaq
Oh,
Ahmed,
yes.
and he fluffed it like Nathan Lyon did in the Headingley test last year to 2019, and
Yeah.
fluffed the run out, and of course Pakistan lost that test by a wicket. But
Yeah.
Wasim's bowling made up for all of that.
Yeah, and the reason I didn't mention Shoaib is one, we covered quite a bit of Shoaib in that 99 podcast I did.
Yeah.
But also,
of course.
secondly, I didn't see that much in the book on him. So I wanted to just cover
fair
parts
enough.
of the book.
Absolutely fair enough.
Yeah, and the last bit I have for you, we generally ask all the writers who come on to give us a recommendation for a book which they've read, which they like, which they would like listeners to read, and we generally put a link to that book. So anything that stands out?
Probably 2 or 3. One would definitely 100% would be Pandits from Pakistan. For how a tour diary is done, that is just, and for such an important series, India, Pakistan, with so much history and background and context and stuff, like just phenomenal. It's a light touch to it, entertaining, personal. Just like I can't recommend that, Pandits from Pakistan from Rahul highly enough. The other one, a really good one actually, is Gideon Haig's book on Warren. Really thin read, and Gideon Haig has many good. The Cricket War Kerry Packer book is excellent as well for history buffs. But Gideon Haig on Warren is, I feel like, a writer writing a very good writer, an excellent writer. One of the finest writers going, I guess, writing on one of his favorite subjects. And the way he's approached that book from the different angles that he's done it is just phenomenal. About his bowling, about him as a person, about his legacy. Just absolutely brilliant. So Gideon Haig on Warren would be the other one. Obviously, you read Beyond a Boundary and stuff, C.L.R. James, to kind of understand what writing has been like. In fact, the other one I would recommend highly is War Minus the Shooting, Mark Hughes's book on the '96 World Cup. I think because, one, it captures a perspective of the game, a unique perspective, because Mark Hughes, because of who he was and how he was, a American guy, but came to the game late and saw it again in a different way. But it also captured the game, I think, at a really pivotal moment in its history. When power definitively shifted. It's about the '96 World Cup. It's about his travels, of course, in the '96 World Cup through the subcontinent, and it captured it at a time when the game pivoted and went from having been controlled by England and Australia to basically going ballistic in the subcontinent, and being run by, at that time, the subcontinent boards, and now leading to India's kind of growth as the kind of predominant force in the game. So yeah, Mark Hughes's book. If I can name one more, actually, Pradeep Magazine's Not Quite Cricket is a great book on match fixing. Really good book on the first kind of, and the best thing about Pradeep Magazine's book, Not Quite Cricket, is he really, the approach that he's taken is such a, you feel like your innocence is going, you can sense his innocence about the game being blown apart by what he's seeing. He's written it in a very kind of live stream of consciousness kind of way, that it's happening as it's happening around him, and how he's kind of changing. I think a lot of people at that time who were put off by the match fixing thing, they would have felt similar to what he felt in that time. So I'd highly recommend that as well.
Yeah, that's a wonderful suggestion. And that book has 2 parts, basically, right? So the first part is about all the fixing, but then the second part is this more introspective, why players would be drawn to fixing kind of thing, which is what you're talking about. It takes the reader into that journey. And talking about match fixing, Osman too has written in detail about that whole episode. from the turn of the century in his book. We don't have the time to get into the details of that, but hopefully we'll have another episode focused on that period in cricket history, which was pivotal for various reasons. That brings us to the end of another episode of the 81 All Out podcast. If you enjoy the work we do, please support us via ko-fi.com. That's ko-fi.com/81 All Out. You can find the link in the show notes, and it'll allow you to either set up a recurring monthly payment or throw in a one-time contribution. Also, please subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever else you prefer. It would be great if you could leave a rating and a review so that more people can find us. As always, we would love to hear your thoughts on the work we do. So please send us your feedback.